Hello, everyone. This is the second IELTS lesson that I have. This is Jason, or you could call me Gwaine. We're going to be looking at part two. The first part of the part two sections is on interrogatives. A lot of people, a lot of students that I've taught, they think that part two is the hardest of the three parts of the speaking. That's mostly because you have to speak a lot longer. And the main problem students have is that they don't know what to say for 2 minutes because they have to talk for 2 minutes. They don't know what to say. So we're going to start looking at part two today. We sort of lay down kind of a foundation and then build on that more in the next lessons. Okay, let's do a little review. Do you remember what IELTS stands for? And remember, every time I ask a question, I'm going to give you a little time to answer. I recommend pausing and trying to answer these questions. Look it up if you don't remember. Well, knowing what that stands for isn't that important, but it's good to know. Okay, how long should you speak when answering a part two question? How long do I recommend that you speak when practicing for part two questions? Okay, if you remember, IELTS is an acronym. It stands for International English Language Testing System. In part two, the interviewer will ask you to speak for 1 to 2 minutes. You need to be prepared to speak for a full 2 minutes. And as I said in the last lesson, I recommend you speak for 3 minutes when practicing. If you can speak for 3 minutes when practicing and comfortable, it's likely that you'll be able to speak for 2 minutes when you're under a little more stress, a little more uncomfortable, when you're worried about talking to the interviewer. As I said before, today we're going to look at interrogatives. I consider this to be the most important part of answering part two questions. Okay, as stated previously, today we're going to look at interrogatives. I consider this to be the most important part of answering part two questions. I think it's a solid foundation to start your part two questions on. And if you don't get any of the other information for part two, interrogatives I think are extremely important. And when you take the test, you'll be given a piece of paper with, they're going to have some interrogatives on it. More than that, they're going to have some questions with interrogatives in them, and it's going to be on the paper. If you take it online, it'll be on the screen. Having more to answer is better than having less to answer. It's better to get cut off in part two than not to talk long enough and have nothing else to say. What are interrogatives? I'll give you a little hint. Interrogatives are also known as WH words. Interrogatives are words we use to form questions when we don't want a yes or no answer. Interrogatives have to be answered with something other than yes or no. How many interrogatives are there? Is can an interrogative? Is do an interrogative? Is what an interrogative? Also, it's good to note and keep in mind that the word interrogative has more than one definition. It could also mean a question, any type of question. But for studying for IELTS, for when I'm speaking about the word interrogative, it's another definition. It's the WH words we're going to talk about in a minute. And I asked you the question a moment ago. There are 7 interrogatives. And I did ask you if can was an interrogative. Can you help me? No, I can't. We can answer yes or no, right? So that means can is not an interrogative. The next one I asked you about is do. Is do an interrogative? Do I look good? Yes, you look good. You look beautiful. You look gorgeous. You look cool. Right? We could answer yes or no. So do is not an interrogative. Then the last one I asked you about is the word what. Is what an interrogative? What is your name? Yes. What is your name? No. Right? We can't answer with yes or no. So what is going to be an interrogative? And as I said previously, there are 7 interrogatives. What are the other 6 interrogatives? Okay, we already mentioned what is an interrogative. The other 6 would be who, where, why, when, how, and which. So you notice how is not a WH word. That's why I don't like to call them WH words, because they don't all start with WH. So we could call them interrogatives. So let's talk about these words a little bit more, right? Think about these questions and try to answer them with the best of your ability or to the best of your ability, right? This may seem simple to you. The first 5 are pretty simple, but it gets a little more complex at the end. So if you already know this, it's fine. Just go through it as a review. What are we asking when we ask a who question? What are we asking when we ask a where question? Okay, so when we ask a who question, we're concerned with people or a person, right? Who is that? That's my friend. His name's Joe. That's my mom. That's my girlfriend. That's my dog, right? Okay, 7:34. All right, and when we ask a where question, we're concerned about places, right? Where do you live? I live in Shanghai, right? Where is your friend? He's at the store, right? It's concerned with places. Let's get to some more of them. What are we asking about when we ask a why question? What are we asking about when we ask a when question? And what are we asking about when we ask a which question? When we ask a why question, we're concerned with a reason, right? Why did you come here? I wanted to see you. Why are you eating food? Because I'm hungry, right? When we ask a when question, we're concerned with time. When do you want to meet? Let's meet Saturday at noon. When were you born? I was born in 1990. When we ask a which question, we're concerned with choice, right? Which color do you prefer? I like red. Which of the dishes would you like to eat? Ooh, I think I'll have some spaghetti, right? And basically, for IELTS, we're not going to worry about which, right? Don't worry about it for IELTS. It's good to know in life, right? For English, remember, you're supposed to be working on your English really well because you have to go study at a university. But for IELTS, right, which color do you like? It can be said, what color do you like, right? We could substitute which. So we're only going to worry about the 6 others. But because it is technically an interrogative, I wanted to bring it up a little. right? But they can be answered with one of the other six, and we're not going to worry about it for IELTS. Okay, like I said earlier, the first five are kind of easy. You probably knew that. Even if you never discussed it, it probably came pretty quickly to your mind. But the next two are a little more complicated. What are we asking when we ask a what question? And what are we asking when we ask a how question? So, like I said, these questions are a little complicated. What is a little different than the other questions in that it can answer more than one thing. It's not just concerned with one thing, right? What time do you want to meet? That's more, you could use that, you could use the word when there instead, right? What is the reason for this? We could use why there, right? What city do you live in? We could use the word where there. So what is a little different than the others? But one thing that what question can cover that the others don't is an object or a thing, right? What is that? That's a chair. So if you're asking what and you come up with one of the others, right? What is the reason when you're preparing for IELTS? That's okay, right? But if you remember, it's for object, right? So if you come up with some other things, you could answer those. That's fine. But remember, right? We're looking for objects, things, right? That we could use to answer what. So for IELTS, what questions are about objects? Now, how questions are the trickiest, maybe the most complicated to say what exactly we're concerned with, because it can vary, right? It's the hardest to define, right? When I ask students, right, what are we asking about with who? They'll say people or a person. What are we asking about with why? They'll say a reason. Then when I say what are we asking about with how, it takes them a while. And then often they'll say the way something happened, right? The way of things, which isn't wrong, but I prefer to say that how questions are about manner, the manner in which something happens, right? How are you? The manner in which you feel, right? How do I get there? The manner in which you go, or how will we go there? How will we get there? The manner in which you get there. So manner is the easiest thing to say that how is about. If it's something else, don't worry about it. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, as I said, right, how questions are more complicated because we could say, how many hamburgers do you want? Ooh, I want two hamburgers if they're very small or something, right? That is not a manner, right? That is a how many, which is a little different. We could put some words after how, and it's not going to be about manner anymore. How far away is the school? It's about 2 kilometers from here, right? So I prefer to describe how questions as the manner of things. But any way you think of how answers, right? For your IELTS, anything is fine, right? If you think of how far away, how many, how long, how tall, how short, any of that is fine. You're just coming up with answers for IELTS. So the word manner is okay, but how is much more than that. It's a little more complicated than just one word answer. Like why is reason, how is a little different. Okay, now this is important for the next classes and for further studying in IELTS. For these classes, right, you must memorize all these interrogatives. You must memorize all these interrogatives. You have to memorize all these interrogatives. Remember them and be able to repeat them back quickly, right? Know them well and be prepared to spout them out within 2 seconds. And remember that which is good to know for other things, but we don't need to worry about which in IELTS, so we won't be talking about it so much more, okay? The order I have them memorized is who, what, where, why, when, how. That is probably something I did as a child. That's probably something that's just the way they're stuck in my head. Um, you only have 1 minute to prepare to answer for part two. You don't want to be spending 10 or 15 seconds. These should be stuck in your head. Who, what, where, why, when, how. And immediately start answering them. You could take notes, right? Immediately start preparing your answer. Don't spend 10 seconds trying to remember what the words mean, right? You should develop a fluency for the language and have these in your head. Who, what, where, why, when, how. Quick, quick, quick. Answer it very, have them in your head very quickly, and then you begin to start thinking of your answers while you're preparing them. You only have 1 minute to prepare, so don't spend your time doing useless stuff. In a later lesson, we'll go through this more thoroughly. We'll just keep going through this. The next several lessons, I'm going to ask you to remember your interrogatives. But we're going to practice applying this stuff, in a practical way to answer an IELTS question. Right? So think of your hometown, pretend it's an IELTS question. Pretend you might get asked about you might get asked about your hometown, but probably not in part two. But we're just using that as an example for today. In these lessons, we'll go over some real questions. But we're going to think of your hometown, right? Pretend it's an IELTS question asking about your hometown. You need to give information about your hometown. Think of answering all the interrogatives about your hometown. Think of the who and the what and the where and the why and the when and the how. Think of any of these things you could ask yourself to answer about your hometown. You should really pause and take some time to think about this before we get into it. We're going to go through all these. But remember, you're thinking about your hometown, the who, the what, the where, the why, the when, and the how. Be able to answer this, right? That should easily give you 2 minutes. Sometimes, like who is very easy when they ask you about your friend, right, or something else. They don't all apply as solidly to each question. That's why I like to use your hometown as an example for this. We could look at a lot of different things we could say about your hometown. Okay, so what can we answer about who as far as your hometown is concerned? All right, so answering who for your hometown. I hope you thought of this some stuff. Or hope you thought about this some, right? So who in your hometown? Parents, right? Your mother and your father. You could talk about your parents. Siblings, if you don't know what a sibling is, it's a brother or a sister. Extended family, right? Anyone in your hometown. You could talk about your grandmother, your grandfather, your uncle, your aunt, your cousins, right? Anyone in your hometown. Friends, right? Talk about all your friends from your hometown. Your neighbors, right? Talk about people who live near you or lived near you when you were living in your hometown, right? All your teachers. Oh, I remember Mrs. So-and-so from second grade, my teacher or my classmates. I remember Timmy from my art class in high school, right? Any people you could think of. The old lady that runs a shop near your house, right? The old man that drives a bus. That little girl who would always run into your garden and play. Anyone in your hometown is a who, right? Anything you could think of about your hometown, as long as you stay on the subject, is fine. Next thing we're looking at is what, right? What in your hometown? Again, yeah, what is objects, but anything you think of is fine, right? What is the main trade, right? Do most people in your hometown, they work in the coal mine, right? Or I had a student once. The people in her hometown, it was her hometown was famous for like making porcelain or ceramic or like china, right? Fancy, nice china. So some areas are known for that, having a main trade. If it's a big city, there's probably more than one trade. You could describe any objects in your hometown, like I said. What normally we think of objects when we think of what? The architecture. What do the houses look like, or what do the buildings look like? The roads, right? Are they old dirt roads, or are they modern paved roads? The trees. If you know anything about trees, what kind of trees? Willow trees, elm trees? I don't. I don't know a lot about trees. I don't know what kind of trees there are in China. Talk about your house, right? That's in your hometown. Yes, it was a big house. It was 2 stories. There were 3 bedrooms, or it was a small house, just one room. Anything, any what you can think of, right? Bring it up. Think about it. Next one we have is where. Where is your hometown, right? Presumably, well, I normally teach Chinese students. This is going to be on a Chinese thing. So somewhere in China, right? But don't just say China. What province, right? Well, it's in Guangdong. It's in Hubei, right? What part of China? It's in Guangdong. That's in the south of China, right? What big city is it near, right? You're talking to a foreigner, and the foreigner might have lived in China for a while, but maybe not. But every country's got big cities, right? I live in a small town. It's in Guangdong. It's in southern China. It is near Guangzhou, or it is near Shenzhen, right? It's maybe 20 kilometers from Guangzhou, or it's 100 kilometers from Shenzhen. You could be specific where it is exactly. Give people more of an idea, and you're spending more time answering. And are there any national landmarks near your hometown, right? So, I don't know if you're from Beijing, the Great Wall. You're from Guangzhou, the Guangzhou Tower, right? So, are there any national landmarks near your hometown that you might be able to talk about? Is it near any important geographical locations, right? It's pretty close, right? I live in Foshan. It's in the Guangdong province. It's in southern China. It's near Guangzhou. It's right next to Guangzhou. It's close to the Pacific Ocean, right? Any big geographical locations, anything, any more details you could provide, anything, right? For where or for the other things. Okay, the next one we have is why. This isn't particularly great about hometown. It might be better for a certain situation, or if they tell you to describe an experience, you can say why you did it. But we're going to try to apply all of these to any question, right? If you come across one that doesn't work too well, maybe you could skip it because we're going to talk about more things in other lessons that you could talk about. But today we're just trying to be able to answer any of this stuff, right? So why? What can we say about why in your hometown? We could say, why did you leave, right? I left because I went to university, or I left for a job. Why did your parents move there, right? Maybe they moved there for work. Maybe it's not their hometown, it's just your hometown. Maybe your parents are from a different hometown, right? Why did your parents move there? Did your parents leave, right? Maybe your hometown, you refer to your hometown as where your grandparents live, and you and your parents go visit your grandparents, right? Did your parents leave? Why did they leave? Do you go back, right? For me, I don't go back to my hometown, but I'm not Chinese. I also don't really have a hometown because my parents moved around a lot when I was a kid. But do you go back? Yes, I go back every year for Spring Festival, right? And is there any historical significance? Right? Why? What happened there? What's going on? Right? Was there a famous battle there? Was it part of some, I don't know, some a key place in history for, I don't know, one of the dynasties, or for some modern history? What happened? Anything historical, right? That's really good to talk about for your hometown. Anything, any whys you can think of. And for all these, there could be many more than what we just talk about. The next one we're looking at is when, right? What when things can we ask and then answer about our hometown? When did you leave? I left, right? We had why did you leave? I left, right? I left because I went to university. When did that happen? Well, I left back in 2010 or 2015, right? Whenever you left. When do you go back to visit? Oh, I go back during National Day. I go back every summer. I go back during Spring Festival. Or I don't go back at all, right? I haven't been back since I left. When did your parents move there, right? We kind of got into this in the whys, right? Oh, my parents moved there when they got married because they got a job, right? They moved there in 1990. When did anything historical happen there, right? If a lot of these are related to the last one, right? If something historical happened, oh, it happened in 750 AD, this happened there, right? Do you plan on living there when you are older? So when, right? Well, right now I'm 20, right? So I think I'll retire when I'm 55. So I plan on moving back there in 35 years. Anything like that. Any wins you could think of. Hometown is not ideal for win, right? That might be more of an experience that you talk about win. But anything you could think of for these, right? You could still solidly answer hometown questions with all these. And the last interrogative we're looking at is how, right? Lots of different hows, right? It doesn't just have to be about manner. How do you feel about your hometown? Most students, most Chinese students I have, they love their hometown. I've only ever had one IELTS student, and she hated her hometown. Almost everyone else seems to love their hometown, right? So just say you love it, or you like it a lot, or you hate it, however you feel. How do you get back to visit, right? Do you take a plane, a train, a bus, etc.? Does your father come pick you up? Or how do you drive yourself? How do you get back? Like I said, use any form of how, not just manner, right? How far from where you are now, right? My hometown is Foshan. It's 20 kilometers from Guangzhou, where I am now, right? Or my hometown is Foshan. It's 8,000 kilometers because I'm in Harbin now. However far it is, right? How far, right? How far is it? And you could answer in, I don't know exactly how many kilometers it is. It takes me 5 hours per plane or 2 hours per bus to get home. How long have you been gone? I've been gone 5 years. I've been gone 2 years. So I still live in my hometown, right? Whatever the answer is, it's okay. Just think about these things to ask. How often do you return? I return once a year for Spring Festival, or I return 3 times a year. I go back for my mother's birthday, Spring Festival, and National Day. Anything, any sort of how that you could think of, ask or answer. I'm sorry. Ask yourself and then answer to the interviewer. Okay, so remember to use the interrogatives to get you thinking about any ways to answer. If you're thinking about why and suddenly you remember this beautiful park and it's very green, that's fine. Answer that, right? It's okay. Use these to get you to think of things that you're able to say. And then make sure another important thing is when you mention anything of the who, what, where, why, when, how, you could give details, right? So who lives in your hometown? My mother. My mother lives in my hometown. Well, then take a couple sentences to describe your mother if you need to, right? How old is she? My mother is 35 years old. What does she look like? Well, if you're older, she's probably not that young. My mother's 45 years old, right? What does she look like? She's a very short woman, very small and thin. She has long black hair. What are her hobbies? Oh, my mother really likes to watch old movies, or she likes to knit or sew, right? Anything like that. Give details when one of these things leads you to something to talk about. You could always give details. And I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Sometimes they might overlap. How far might also be an answer to where. It doesn't matter if you came up with it when you're thinking about how or where, just so long as you answered it, right? Some of them overlap. And the paper they give you will have some interrogatives on it, right? It'll give you hints of things to say. You don't have to talk about all of them. Most students are going to need more than just that, right? It might be the paper might say, okay, describe your hometown. It's a part 2 question. So the main question is describe your hometown, even though that's not exactly a question. Then they'll give you some kind of hints of things you could answer below that. You don't have to use them, but you should use them. And those will have some interrogatives on it. Describe your own hometown, right? Then it might say, remember to tell us how you feel about your hometown, or where your hometown is, or who do you know that still lives in your hometown, right? So that's some of them. But you could always add more to give more detail. Because like I said, the main problem students have with talking about part 2 is they often don't have enough to say. So most students need more than just those 2 or 3 hints at answering it. And that's where these interrogatives come in. Plus some of the other things we'll be talking about in later lessons will also help you with that. Most students need more. So you have these tools to answer more interrogative questions now, right? You can completely just answer a part two question with interrogatives. You ask yourself these questions and then answer them to the interviewer. But and that's great, and you might do well on it. But there's going to be some other lessons. Well, you will tell you how to do better at it. So you'll ask the interrogatives, but when you're talking about things, you'll do other things. But we'll get to those more in future lessons. Okay, memorize your interrogatives. Remember them, remember them, remember them for next time, right? We're going to be building on that. So your homework is to memorize your interrogatives. Now, I'm not personally talking to you, but next lesson I'll ask, okay, so what are your interrogatives? You tell them to the screen, right? Who, what, where, why, when, how. Who, what, where, why, when, how. Remember them. We're going to use the interrogatives as a solid foundation for other ways to answer in later lessons. So just make sure you remember your interrogatives, right? It's important. They'll be coming up again. We'll be talking about them more. And I still think this is the solid best way to start answering a part two question is to use interrogatives to help you get the answer from within your mind, right? Tell me about your hometown. Okay, who lives in my hometown? Where's my hometown? When my hometown? When did I leave my hometown? Why? Why did I leave? How? Right? Think of all these things. They'll help you answer. They'll give you more answers than just the hints that the IELTS interviewer will give you with a piece of paper. All right, next time we're going to look at your senses. So you need to think about that. What are your senses? What are they? They're how you perceive the world. We'll talk more about them next time. And a couple other things. Practice, practice, practice. So be practicing, not just for IELTS, but be practicing your English. Practice, practice, practice. You should always be practicing. Again, I know I said this earlier in this lesson. I said it last lesson. Practice your English. Practice your IELTS too, but practice, practice, practice your English. Because the reason you're taking IELTS presumably is because you want to study at a university where they're going to be giving you classes in English. So be working on your English, constantly working on it. Prepare for the next lesson. This time, really, I just want you to remember your interrogatives, right? Don't take the third lesson until you can spout out your interrogatives really quickly. Who, what, where, why, when, how. Who, what, where, why, when, how. Be able to give them, be able to know them, remember them. Yeah? Make sure you guys do that. That's you should have that done because we'll look back at those a lot, especially for part two. And, one of the reasons we're doing part two first is because you could use some of this stuff for part one and three, even though it might not be necessary. But sometimes in 1 and 3, you might be struggling a little to answer something. So we could use these things too for part 1 and 3, which is why we look at part 2 first. And we spend more time on part 2 because it's the longest and the students have the most trouble with it. And we'll only spend probably 1 lesson in part 1 and 1 lesson in part 3. But we really solidly look at part 2, different ways to answer it. Okay, thank you so much. I hope you got something out of this class. I hope you keep up with it. I hope you continue taking the classes. I hope that you take the next one. And thanks again. And remember, prepare for the next lesson. Memorize your interrogatives. Who, what, where, why, when, how. All right, thanks, guys. Bye-bye.